What if the most powerful force on earth is not a government you can vote for? What if real power does not sit in parliaments, elections, or public debates? Throughout history, every major shift followed the same pattern. A hidden decision. A public justification. A population that never sees the hand pulling the strings. If a system exists above reality, and if humanity is being integrated into it, then control cannot remain abstract. It needs managers. It needs narratives. And it needs moments of fear powerful enough to reset the world. In this episode, we are not asking who rules in secret. We are asking how power hides, how fear is manufactured, and why awakening is the one thing that cannot be controlled. Because when people stop reacting and start seeing, every illusion begins to collapse. If you're into hidden truths and deeper questions, subscribe. When people hear the term secret government, the first reaction is often rejection. It sounds exaggerated, dramatic, unrealistic. And that reaction is important. Because the idea of a secret government does not survive by being obvious. It survives by being misunderstood. So let's start with a clear definition. A secret government does not mean a hidden room where unknown people sit around a table controlling the world. That image is a distraction. In conspiracy theory, the secret government refers to power that operates outside democratic visibility, power that is not directly elected, not transparent, and not accountable to the public, yet consistently shapes global outcomes. In other words, it is not about secrecy in the sense of invisibility. It is about distance from public control. The visible government versus real power. Every modern society has two layers of governance. The first layer is visible. Elections, presidents, parliaments, political debates, news cycles. This layer creates the impression of control. The second layer is structural. Economic systems, financial institutions, military and intelligence networks, corporate interests, technological infrastructure. This layer rarely changes regardless of who wins elections. That is where conspiracy theory begins. Because if democracy is real power, then major global directions should change dramatically when leadership changes. But they don't. Wars continue. Surveillance expands. Debt systems remain. Corporate power grows. Technology integration accelerates. The question becomes unavoidable. The politicians change, but outcomes remain consistent. Where is the continuity coming from? The concept of unelected power in conspiracy frameworks. The secret government is often described as unelected power. Not illegal. Not necessarily hidden. But structurally protected from public influence. Examples include intelligence agencies that operate under classified authority, military-industrial networks that profit from conflict, central banking systems that influence economies without direct democratic control, large corporations whose decisions affect millions of lives without public consent, think tanks and policy groups that shape legislation before it reaches Parliament. None of this is secret in isolation. What is conspiratorial is the coordination and alignment of these forces toward outcomes that do not reflect public will. This is why conspiracy theorists argue that power is no longer located where people are taught to look. Why secrecy is structural, not personal. Another important clarification. The secret government is not about evil individuals. It is about systems that reward certain behaviors. A politician who challenges structural power is removed, marginalized, or neutralized. A politician who aligns with it advances. Over time, the system selects for obedience. No conspiracy meeting is required. The structure itself enforces compliance. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of conspiracy theory. Control does not require villains. It requires incentives. Historical patterns that fuel the theory. Conspiracy theorists point to repeating historical patterns. Major crises are often followed by expansion of government power, reduction of personal freedoms, increased surveillance, long-term policies introduced as temporary measures. This pattern appears after wars, terrorist attacks, economic collapses, and global emergencies. The public narrative is always similar. This is for your safety. This is temporary. This is necessary. Yet the measures rarely disappear. This leads to the idea that crises are not just events but opportunities. This does not mean crises are fake. It means they are used. Why conspiracy theorists believe a hidden coordination exists. The reason many people believe in a secret government is not because of paranoia. It is because of consistency. Different countries, different cultures, different leaders. Yet the same solutions appear. Centralization, surveillance, digital identity, control of information, technological dependency. From a conspiracy perspective, this suggests coordination beyond national borders. Not a world government in the traditional sense, but a shared agenda. The role of secrecy here is the uncomfortable truth. Every large organization requires secrecy. Military secrecy, corporate secrecy, intelligence secrecy. The conspiracy argument is not that secrecy exists. It is that secrecy has become the default state of power. When decisions affecting billions are classified, insulated, or justified only after implementation, democracy becomes symbolic. People vote, but they do not decide. Why this matters for the series? This concept connects directly to the previous episodes. If reality functions as a system, if humans are integrated into that system, if non-human intelligence is being normalized, then power cannot be chaotic. It must be managed. The secret government in conspiracy theory is not the controller of reality. It is the administrator, the interface between abstract power and human society. Why this is considered conspiracy, not fact. This is important. There is no single document that proves the existence of a secret government. There is no official confirmation. What exists are patterns, structures, and outcomes. Conspiracy theory connects those elements into a framework. You are not asked to believe it. You are asked to consider whether the official explanation fully explains reality. The key takeaway: the idea of a secret government is not about fear. It is about asking where power truly resides. Who makes decisions that cannot be voted on? Who benefits from permanent crisis? Who remains untouched by public outrage? Because if power were truly visible, it would not need to hide behind complexity. And if it were truly accountable, it would not survive without consent. If power truly operates in the shadows, then it faces one fundamental problem. People do not willingly give up freedom. They have to be convinced. History shows the same solution every time. Not persuasion, not explanation, but crisis. A threat so large that resistance feels irresponsible. A danger so overwhelming that control feels like protection. Secret power does not reveal itself through laws. It reveals itself through emergencies. Moments where fear replaces debate. Where urgency replaces consent. Where people stop asking who decided and start asking who will save them. This is where the idea of Project Bluebeam appears. Not as a plan written on paper, but as a concept. The ultimate psychological operation. A global event capable of unifying humanity under one narrative, one authority, one solution. Because when the threat feels non-human, power no longer needs justification. It becomes necessary. Project Bluebeam is one of the most controversial modern conspiracy theories, not because it describes impossible technology, but because it explains a psychological mechanism that has worked repeatedly throughout history. At its core, Project Bluebeam is not about aliens invading Earth. It is about manufacturing a global perception capable of justifying total centralization of power. The theory does not require the threat to be real. It only requires the threat to be believable, overwhelming, and impossible for individual nations to handle alone. The term Project Blue Beam became popular in the 1990s and is often linked to the idea that advanced holographic technology, global communication systems, and psychological operations could be combined into a single world-shaping event. Over time, the theory evolved alongside technological progress and changing public mentality. To understand why some people find this theory plausible, one basic principle must be understood. People accept control far more easily when they believe it is necessary for survival. Fear suppresses critical thinking. Urgency suppresses debate. An external threat suppresses internal conflict. From a conspiracy theory perspective, a system seeking global integration cannot rely on politics alone. Politics divide. Religion divides. Culture divides. But a non-human threat unifies. In this framework, aliens are not important as literal beings. They are important as symbols. A threat that belongs to no nation. No ideology. No belief system. A threat that demands a global response. According to the theory, Project Blue Beam would not operate as a single dramatic event announced in advance. It would function in stages, gradually shaping perception. The first stage is psychological conditioning. For decades, popular culture, movies, documentaries, news reports, and leaks have introduced the idea of extraterrestrial or non-human intelligence. At first, the topic is ridiculed. Then it becomes mysterious. Eventually, it becomes normalized. The language changes. The stigma fades. The goal is not to convince people that aliens exist. The goal is to make the idea no longer shocking. The second stage is confusion. Contradictory information. Ambiguous official statements. Unclear footage. Partial disclosures. Nothing definitive. Nothing conclusive. Just enough uncertainty to keep the public alert and psychologically open. People do not know what to believe, but they feel that something is different. The third stage, according to the theory, is the event. This does not necessarily mean holograms in the sky, as the theory is often mocked. It could be any large-scale technological or media event that appears beyond normal human control. Something global. Something unprecedented. Something that creates a sense of existential danger. The key idea is this. People do not need to be fooled by a simple illusion. They need to be guided toward the explanation that offers safety and order. The fourth stage is the solution. A unified authority. Centralized coordination. Emergency measures. Expanded surveillance. Accelerated integration. Everything presented as temporary. Necessary. Inevitable. Why do some people believe this theory is plausible? Because history shows a repeating pattern. After major crises, power concentrates. Rights are reduced. Surveillance expands. Temporary measures become permanent. Structures introduced during emergencies rarely disappear afterward. Project Blue Beam is seen as the ultimate extension of this pattern. Not a regional crisis. Not a political emergency. But a global existential threat. It is extremely important to state clearly. There is no verified evidence that Project Blue Beam exists. There are no confirmed documents. There are no proven plans. That is why it remains a conspiracy theory. What makes the theory compelling is not proof but logic. A system seeking total integration requires total justification. And the most effective justification is existential fear. When placed within the context of the previous episodes, the theory becomes internally consistent. If reality functions as a system, if humans are being integrated into that system, if the idea of non-human intelligence is being normalized, then a non-human threat no longer feels impossible. It feels prepared for. Project Bluebeam is not fundamentally a story about holograms or aliens. It is a story about perception management, narrative control, and the use of fear to override consent. And that leads directly to the final part of this episode. If fear is the most powerful tool of control, then the only real form of resistance is not rebellion. It is inner coherence. Which brings us to the final subject. Activate your light body. If fear can unite the world, then fear can also control it. Every system built on crisis needs one thing above all else: a population that reacts automatically. People who panic are easy to guide. People who feel lost are easy to lead. People who are disconnected from themselves are easy to control. That is why the real battlefield is not in the sky and not in government buildings. It is inside the human mind. Because a person who is centered, aware, and internally stable cannot be manipulated the same way. And this is where the final idea of this episode begins. Not as a mystical escape, but as a form of resistance. Activate your light body. When people hear the phrase, activate your light body, most imagine something mystical, supernatural, or even absurd. They think of glowing auras, spiritual fantasies, or people claiming to transform into beings of light. But in the context of this series, the term light body does not refer to a literal transformation. It refers to a state of internal coherence, a way of functioning that makes a human being harder to manipulate. To understand this idea, we have to go back to a very simple question. What is the most controllable type of person? It is not the weak person. It is not the poor person. It is not even the uneducated person. The most controllable person is the one who is internally unstable. Someone who reacts emotionally to every stimulus, depends on external validation, cannot sit with their own thoughts, is constantly distracted, seeks direction from outside. Such a person does not need to be forced into obedience. They naturally follow whatever gives them safety, comfort, or approval. This is the kind of human that systems are built around. Predictable, reactive, externally driven. Now imagine the opposite. A person who is emotionally stable, can observe their thoughts without reacting instantly, does not depend on constant external validation, is comfortable in silence, makes decisions from awareness, not impulse. This kind of person is much harder to control. Not because they are rebellious, but because they are centered. They do not panic easily. They do not follow every narrative. They do not react automatically. This is the core idea behind the concept of the light body. Not a glowing body, but a coherent inner state. Where the idea comes from, many ancient traditions described the human being as more than just flesh and bone. Egyptian traditions spoke of the Ka and the Ba, aspects of the self that survived beyond the body. Eastern traditions spoke of subtle bodies, energy centers, and states of enlightenment. Gnostic traditions spoke about awakening from illusion. Although the language was symbolic, the underlying idea was similar. The human being has the potential to move from a reactive state to an aware state, from fragmentation to coherence. In modern psychological language, this would not be called a light body. It would be called integrated consciousness, self-regulation, emotional stability, metacognition, internal locus of control. Different words, same idea. Why systems prefer fragmented humans? A fragmented mind is easier to influence. If a person is constantly distracted, cannot focus, reacts emotionally to headlines, seeks approval online, fears silence, then their behavior becomes predictable. And predictable behavior is the foundation of control. Systems do not need to dominate stable individuals. They simply shape the environment so that instability becomes normal. Constant stimulation, constant urgency, constant noise. Over time, the reactive state becomes the default human condition. Light body as resistance in this context. Activating your light body means one simple thing. becoming internally stable enough that external systems cannot easily control your reactions. It means noticing your thoughts instead of being ruled by them, pausing before reacting, choosing awareness over impulse, creating an inner reference point. A person with this state does not panic during crises, does not follow every narrative, does not depend on mass approval, does not surrender autonomy easily. This is why, in many ancient traditions, awakening was considered dangerous. Not because it was evil, but because it made people less controllable. The connection to the rest of the series: if the world functions as a system, and if humans are integrated into technological structures, and if fear is used to centralize control, then the most powerful act is not rebellion. It is inner coherence. A system can control behavior. It can control information, can control environments, but it cannot fully control a person who is aware of their own reactions. That is the idea behind the light body. Not an escape from reality, but a different way of existing inside it. The real meaning of activation: there is no switch, no ritual, no instant transformation. Activation is a process. It happens when a person becomes more aware of their inner state, reduces automatic reactions, builds emotional stability, reconnects with silence and reflection over time. This creates a different type of human being. Less reactive, less predictable, less programmable. And from the perspective of a control system, that kind of human is the most difficult to manage. If a secret government manages the system, and if blue beam represents the ultimate use of fear, then the final question is simple. What happens when fear no longer works? That is where real freedom begins. And that is what the ancient traditions called the light body. If power hides in the shadows and fear is used to guide entire populations, then the real question is not who controls the world. The real question is this: how much of your life is controlled by your own reactions? Because systems can only manage what is predictable, and fear only works on those who have no center. When a human being becomes internally stable, aware, and present, control stops being automatic. And that is where real freedom begins. Not in governments, not in technology, but inside the human mind.